Hey everyone, welcome. We'll get started in just a moment. If you all wouldn't mind just introducing yourselves in the chat while we wait for just a few more people to join. We'd love to know where you are and who you are. And I will also just describe the slides before we start for anybody who's blind or low vision or on the phone. Hi, Jerica. So this slide has Leading with Empathy and Allyship with Melinda Brianna Epler, our logo, myself with a coffee cup, and the faces of many of the diverse folks that have joined us over the last year and a half. It says podcast available now with the logos of Spotify, Apple, Stitcher, SoundCloud. This next slide, it says, it's the right thing to do, it's the just thing to do, plus it's good for business and makes us all happier, with the photo of my book, How to Be an Ally by Melinda Brianna Epler, available now. It has the URL melindabriannaepler.com. And interested in bulk orders or copies signed by the author, just email us at contact@changecatalyst.co. Coming up on December 7th is our next live show, Redefining Normal in the Remote Hybrid Workplace. You can follow us on social media to stay up to date and learn more at ally.cc. And this also has our Change Catalyst logo with Leading with Empathy and Allyship logo as well. Hi, Pamela, Rachel, and Michelle. Thanks for introducing yourselves. This is season 5. Our URL is ally.cc and hashtag is Allyship podcast. And this is the same image of myself with a coffee cup and an orange shirt and many photos of the folks that have joined us over the last year and a half. And today is Addressing Burnout in the Workplace with Irena Sargent, Anthony Ware, Aldia, and myself, Melinda Brianna Epler. And this has photos of each of us, and we'll describe ourselves in a moment. This is created by Change Catalyst, changecatalyst.co. And we do have a code of conduct. Just be radically inclusive and not sure where that last slide is, but there it is. Thanks to our sponsors, First Tech Federal Credit Union. Really appreciate your partnership. You can learn more at ally.cc again. And Asl Interpretation is by Interpreter Now, www.interpreter-now.com, with Jennifer and Norma today. All right, let's jump in. So welcome everyone to Leading with Empathy and Allyship and our Change Catalyst live event series. Here we have deep, real conversations about how we can all be more inclusive leaders in our workplaces and communities. I'm Melinda Brianna Epler, author of How to Be an Ally and founder and CEO of Change Catalyst. And at Change Catalyst, we build inclusive innovation through training, consulting, coaching, and events. And this is a safe space to learn how to lead the change, build empathy for each other, and understand those tangible actions we can all take to build a better world for our colleagues, friends, neighbors, and ourselves as well. A special thank you today to First Tech Federal Credit Union for sponsoring this episode. And today we'll be talking with 3 incredible guests about addressing burnout in the workplace. We'll talk about what causes burnout, how to prevent it, and how to support each other through it. And then also what managers and leaders can do to address burnout in the organization. Here to discuss the subject with me are Irena, founder and HABC, head anti-burnout champion at Hooky Wellness, Aldia, founder of Better Work Labs, and my friend Anthony Ware, principal at Aware Catalysts. Welcome, you 3.
Thank you.
Thank you for having us.
Yeah.
Thank you.
It's great to see you all, and it's great to see all our audience members too. Thank you for introducing yourselves again. Really fantastic to see you. Online, just on screen, you'll see our ASL interpreters today, Jennifer and Norma. Thank you to Interpreter Now for our ongoing partnership. We really appreciate you. And this is also being live captioned by Maggie at White Coat Captioning. So if you want to turn on captioning, just go to the bottom of your screen and click closed caption there. And then Renzo and Christina are here from Change Catalyst as well, doing amazing things behind the scenes, including in the chat and Q&A. So if you have any issues, please let us know. And please engage with us in the chat. It definitely makes a difference. We want to know what's resonating for you. If you have questions, please ask them. You can use the Q&A function at the bottom so that we make sure that we catch them, and we'll leave time for questions at the end. All right, so let's take a moment to just first share our names and describe ourselves for anybody who's blind and low vision. So I'll start. I'm Melinda Brianna Epler, and I am a white woman with long red hair. I'm wearing a dark blue and white striped long sleeve shirt. And in the background is a white room with some plants and my book in the background and a black couch with a couple pillows on it.
Hi, I'll go. I'm Irena Sargent. I am a Black woman with short blue hair today. Just put in the wax and changed the color for the day just for this audience. I am in my office with a bright teal wall behind me, plants, one of my first paintings that I purchased of a woman with a coconut that she is drinking out of to always set the vibe. So excited to be here. Oh, and I have on a black sweatshirt that says anti-burnout behavior.
Hi, everyone. My name is Al D. I'm the founder of Better Work Labs. I am an Asian male with black hair, glasses, and a navy shirt. When I am in my office with a bookcase in the background and at my laptop.
Hello, everyone. I'm Anthony Ware, and I'm a Black man with a black polo shirt, wearing glasses, I'm wearing glasses, not the polo shirt, and a creamish white colored background.
Awesome, awesome, cool. And Al, apologies, I think I mispronounced your last name.
No worries, it's all good.
So would you all just take a few moments to say a little bit about what you do and why addressing burnout is important to you? And Al, since we just talked, why don't you go ahead?
Sure, I'm happy to. So I am the founder of Better Work Labs, which is an organization that works with companies who want to create better workplaces for their people, where they can thrive and reach their human potential. Prior to founding Better Works Labs, I have worked in large corporations pretty much for my entire career, both first as a management consultant, as well as working in an enterprise software company for the last few years. I've seen firsthand the challenges as well as the implications of burnout, particularly on people, and particularly for people who are in high performing or fast moving environments. I've seen this both in terms of being a people manager and leader, as well as experiencing it myself. And I'm certainly happy to talk about that a little bit later, but part of why selfishly I care so deeply about this is just through my own personal experience for myself and trying to navigate burnout, as well as for others around me, both in terms of people I managed or coach, as well as friends and colleagues. I'm really fortunate that I have a good network of people, both past colleagues and professional friends and things like that, and witnessing some of the challenges that they've faced, certainly over the past 18 to 20 months. But even before that, particularly in environments that do really demand high performance, I have a real big mission to figure out how I can play a role in helping create better workplaces where people can thrive, but to do so in a healthy way. And so that's why I'm really committed to trying to do my best to help solve these challenges.
Awesome.
I'll jump in. I'm Irina Sargent. I'm the founder and CEO, and I also say the head anti-burnout champion at Hooky Wellness. Yes, that is like play hooky, which is exactly the vibe that I'm looking to impart. So I'm extremely passionate about doing something about burnout because in layman's terms, it's trash. And it is extremely common. Before the pandemic, it was affecting over 77% of the professional workforce. It just took for us to go through a pandemic to start talking about it, to stop pointing fingers and to stop acting as though it would go away on its own. Similar to Al, I built my career in high performance environments. I've worked in industries including workspace design and office furniture. After getting my MBA at Indiana University, I moved into consumer goods and worked at Nestle, building some of the world's biggest, most favored brands. And then I also spent some time in tech working at Intuit on the QuickBooks business. So throughout that journey, about 4 years ago, I experienced my biggest battle with burnout. And that opened my eyes to how rampant it was, yet how far from alone I was. So within that experience, I recognized how challenging it was to get the support you needed when you needed it most. Some of that being on the external side of the friction-filled support systems, and some of that being on the internal. So that drove me really to pivot and to do something about it. So I am in the process of building Hooky, completely focused on burnout relief, providing comprehensive and practical support for those high performers to empower them to be a catalyst for an anti-burnout workplace. We need all the support that we can have. So I'm excited to be on this panel and to be with other advocates in this space, because the more conversations, the more advocates, the more hands-on in this space, the greater the change we can make, because it won't go away on its own. Going back to the office won't do it. Sorry to tell you, but excited to have the combo, excited to get your questions, and to share a little bit about what we've been learning in this space over the past 3 years.
Awesome.
I love that, playing hooky. So for me, so Anthony Ware, principal and founder of Aware Catalysts and lead researcher, publisher for Founder Mental Wealth. And I wanted to think back of it when I really thought about this question. For me, actually, it gets personal down to when I was a teenager. I was being raised by my dad raised myself, my two younger brothers. And one day I come home from junior high, I think it was, and my dad's friend is waiting there saying, "Your dad's in the hospital." And it was because of exhaustion. So he was working his job and then working his side hustle and not getting any sleep and rest. And so it was literally exhaustion, burnout, that put him in the hospital, which then meant myself and my two younger brothers had to go do his side hustle. It was a janitorial business. So when I really think about this, that's really the seed of why I work around burnout. And actually for me, I focus on the whole concept of mental wealth, and specifically for underestimated, initially entrepreneurs, but the range was expanded thanks to the pandemic, to help ERGs in mid to large size companies, with the concept of mental wealth. We can dig into it, but it's using that to help address the challenges around burnout.
Yeah. Well, thank you for sharing that experience too. I think each of you have had an catalyzing experience with burnout in one way or another. Can you talk a little bit about what that experience of burnout is, and maybe just take just like 3 key signs, or what is I think a lot of us have a sense of what it is, but so if you could kind of distill it to 3 or so points, that would be awesome.
Sure, I'll jump in there. So technically, burnout is the result of untreated chronic stress. So it is not a fluke. It is not something that happens overnight, but it is a progression of things that are untreated and unmanaged. My personal experience of burnout, I had many, I would say, because it is not necessarily a one and done. So I've experienced all of the stages, but depending upon which research you read, they can break it down in different ways. I like to use 3 key stages. So the first one is exhaustion. That's the earliest warning sign. That is a key indicator that something is off. This is more than being tired. This is a matter of chronic exhaustion where no matter what amount of sleep or additional naps you're adding in, you're still feeling depleted and lacking energy to do not just your basic task, but those tasks that typically would bring you joy. So exhaustion is a very common early warning flag that something is awry. The next stage that I always like to talk about is the stage where it's space of talking about withdrawal. So it's a matter of pulling away from those things, pulling away from those people that could be very fulfilling in past, but needing to go inside. So in this space, you often hear people also replacing positive coping mechanisms or methodologies of managing stress with false cures is what they're called. So doubling down on alcohol, cannabis, those things that can be used recreationally, but you notice it becomes more of a crutch and you often even recognize that it's an unhealthy usage of it. So those are just two of the example, but there are of course more. And then the third stage is where it really turns into a slippery slope. So this is where it's defined really as a detachment. So you start to feel empty inside is what people can describe. Things are all for naught. Cynicism is in an all-time high. All-time high. Everybody's stupid and no one can do their job around you is very common. But this is where it can quickly turn into official mental health challenges and issues. So depression, anxiety, and other things are quickly at your door, as well as PTSD-like symptoms can start to arise. And I had some of those where my outlook would trigger a visceral, physical, internal reaction to it. And there's many, many other symptoms and signs, but those are some of the top ones, very common. So just those three stages. And then last but not least, stress and burnout are not the same thing. So being very, very aware that they are very different. Burnout is what happens when you do not treat stress, and even stress has multiple stages. So I'd like to call it out because we're getting into the space of greenwashing burnout, where all of a sudden everybody's dealing with burnout, and we don't want to discount this very deep internal feeling that can happen, especially in the third stage, which is around detachment.
Al or Anthony, want to add?
Yes. For me, I think burnout was, I know I talked about my father previously, but I've had similar like phases throughout especially when I look at the last 3 decades of going from working in a corporate environment, high pressure, in commercial real estate, and then over the last decade, running 4 or 5 different companies, starting, failing, and I think the thing to realize is that unless something gets really bad or really off, oftentimes you don't realize you're in the burnout. Like, I mean, it's just until something. And for me, the thing that like now I can look back, the thing that clicked is starting to detach from people. And I'm social, like that is just me by nature. And actually, fortunately enough, I had good people around me to point out like, hey, we haven't seen you in a while. Like, not like, hey, we want to go hang out, but just we haven't seen you. And so I think when it comes to burnout, I love, how the foundation of this conversation has gone is that, like, for me, it just was realizing that I had that issue or I had that challenge. And during the pandemic, it's been much of the same.
Yeah, I would just, I loved what both of them already said, but I would also add, I think for me, the one that really stuck out was just this general feeling of not being myself. And so as an example to what Anthony had said, I am also a pretty outgoing and social person in general. Generally speaking, I enjoy being around other people. And I also am someone who tends to be pretty positive. And I think the big kind of aha moments for me was when I stopped being both of those things. I started not being the positive person. I started being a little bit of the cynic. I started not being upbeat about the work I was doing. I mean, certainly I've always, every now and then you always kind of complain about work. That was a little bit to expected, I think, for me. But it was to the point where it seemed so out of character. And I think to maybe what Anthony said, at first, I didn't really understand it. It really took other people around me to shine a light back to be able to say, hey, not only are you not being yourself, but there might be some reasons for why this is. And that was kind of the aha moment where I was like, oh, okay, there's this clinical thing called burnout. And that was what really honestly led me to kind of explore more about it. And once I learned more about it, and once I started talking to more professionals, licensed professionals, health professionals about it, I started to realize, okay, now I potentially understand why I'm not being the person that I normally am.
So what is the cause? What is the cause of it? How do we start to recognize that?
I think it's a great question. So I can maybe start, with this. And I think that for me, at least, one of the things I started thinking a lot about was just the general work environment that I was in. One of the things, as someone who has been, or I'd like to think I've been, a high performer for all of my career, is that typically when something has gone wrong or something maybe didn't work out the way that I wanted it to, I always kind of thought, okay, what could I have done better? What could I learn from this? What could I do differently? And I think at first that was kind of the mindset that I took when I was experiencing potential symptoms of what could be considered burnout. Eventually, because of the coaching that I got and the advice that I got, I started to realize that in a lot of cases, like, burnout isn't so much about you or what you did or what you didn't do, but it has a lot to do with the environmental factors that exist. In this case, within the workplace, but certainly it could also be, depending on who you are or what you're experiencing, other aspects, of your life. And so once I started looking more at kind of those environmental factors of the space that I was in, that's when I started realizing, okay, this isn't just about me. This is something that's, bigger than me. And so, for me, that was kind of the first kind of step I took towards understanding more deeply what potentially was causing this for me. And if I can point to one thing, I'll give one tactical example, and then I'll let my other fellow panelists maybe chime in as well. During over the past year and a half or so, in the group that I was in, we went through constant change. There were just a lot of just moving pieces to our business. Certainly, COVID did not help. And I think at one point in time, I counted, we went through maybe 6 or 7 organizational changes, either with a team getting moved in or a new leader coming in or someone going away. And I think if I reflect back on it and try to think about how that might have impacted me, I can definitely see the detachment coming into play. Because after maybe about the 3rd or 4th change, I think in my head, I started to wonder, well, why am I even doing this if if someone else is just going to come in and throw my work out the window and make me work on something new? And so that was like one example where I could see maybe some of the environmental factors really playing into some of the burnout that I was experiencing.
Irina or Anthony, go ahead.
I want to actually build off of what Irina was saying, the difference between stress and burnout. There is a difference between stress and burnout. And I think fundamentally, when you look at burnout, it's been because of the culture. If you look at the last 100 years in the States and then in Europe and other places, this whole concept of work, be the best, whatever that means, our not unhealthy, but the relationship with stress. There's a book called The Upside of Stress, which I love because, reframing what stress is, all stress isn't bad stress. It just depends. There's stress to have a baby, there's stress for an airplane to take off. But this whole concept of the culture that we built into this workplace, and and culture in its broadest sense. And so like getting plugged into that from childhood into birth, and now we have the pandemic and are coming out of it, and people are trying to go back to normal. Well, normal got us to this point where we have to have this panel. Like there is a universe where this panel doesn't need to exist. But I think fundamentally, I think the cause of burnout is that we've been programmed into the things that make this happen. So whether it's, performance reviews, or not making mental health as fundamental as physical health and those kind of things. So that's like I think on a broader level.
I'll add a couple notes onto that. Completely agree with everything that has been shared. I'm very much a MBA type A, so I think in things and frameworks. There's a couple things that have been known. As I was talking about the workplace is a very common driver of burnout, but it is not the only driver. But when you think about it, there are 6 known and proven dimensions of what happens in the workplace that can lead to burnout. So that's things that we all know: workload, key. There's a matter of fairness. There's a matter of reward. There's a matter of values, community, perceived control. So those are like data-backed, known as the drivers in the workplace. And you can imagine how the changes over the past 2 years don't quite line up to favorable conditions in many of those buckets, especially perception of control. And so that's workplace. But when you think about burnout, it's bigger than work, even for those of us who work is a very big part of our identity. For me, lifing was a big part of why my burnout happened, because I didn't have the bandwidth to handle the things that normally I was able to handle. So for me, my version of lifing was a dual income household, moving across the country multiple times within a year, dealing with starting new jobs and career, an aging, ailing parent that had cancer, and figuring out just life and internal changes of, I don't like this anymore. This is no longer the path for me. But when you think about life, we don't talk about those transition points like they are normal, but they are normal. We are not, especially when you look at millennials, we're not in the mindset of staying in one career path for 60 years. It's just not what we do. So what about those shifts? And so when you think about life, growth and changes in internal values, which is another big thing that has been going on over the past year with people as things are coming to light, those are all things that breed burnout conditions and can layer on top of everyday ongoing stress that just exists in life. So what causes burnout? It is a myriad of things, which is why it is such a complex issue and that there is no silver bullet. If anyone ever tries to sell you a silver bullet, go the other way. There are things that can be done. There are things that can lessen the impact. There are things that can improve situations, but it is complex. It is personal. It is systematic, collective, and individual, but there are things that can be done at all levels. And once you start understanding the things that can cause it and breed the conditions, we can start making these much needed structural changes, because hustle culture is not it. It was never great. There is no badge for burnout. So let's stop wearing it.
Yeah. Okay. So let's take each of those, starting with the individual, because so many of us, I think, are experiencing this, that there are some things that each of us can do to address it in ourselves. So let's start with solutions at the individual level. Irina, do you want to, since you're just there?
Yeah. So there are 3 things that I like to say, and I like to use very marketing language or metaphors. Take your vitamins. When we think about burnout, it is not a sickness. It's not like, oh, you have a cold, go take this. It is a matter of what can you do to prevent and get ahead of it. It's like, I have hip issues. If only I did the exercises my physical therapist gave me, then I could avoid the flare-ups. But oh, surprise, here we go. I have to go back. And it's the same type of thing with burnout. And I run into this with a lot of clients. They're like, I thought I changed this. And it's like, but were you doing the same behaviors ongoing? So taking your vitamins is a matter of practicing those mental wellness tools and behaviors that we know help. It is proven. We know that meditation helps with managing symptoms of anxiety and stress. We know that doing some type of physical activity helps. We know that doing some type of communal and community activities help. All of those things really matter. It does not have to be the way in which everyone else does it. So finding your lane and your way into wellness is huge. And think of that as your vitamins. I call them cheat codes, but that's a whole nother conversation. Another one is recognizing when life is lifing for you. So if your bandwidth is not what it normally is, you have to adjust. There's no badge in being a superhero anymore. Like, especially for those of us of color, like, and especially for Black women, we are known to do it all. That was never sustainable, and it's really not now. So no, there's no surprise that people of color have higher levels of burnout. There's no surprise that women have higher levels of burnout. It's because they're already juggling a lot. And so especially recognizing when things are not normal and your bandwidth has changed and you need to change those behaviors accordingly, that's another big thing. And then giving yourself, I always say, space and grace. All these are easier said than done. The hardest part is giving yourself permission to do things differently. So bringing a little rebel in your life, play hooky, hence the whole thing about playing hooky. Give yourself that space to do what you need. For me, it took for my therapist to literally put me on timeout in order for me to start doing that. That is why playing hooky is the way in. I was on leave and I was still working. And in week 1, she was like, this is not what we're here for. And so she put me on timeout where I could not work during certain periods of the day, even though it was on my business. And so in that, I found the space to connect with others. I found the space to do those things that were on my list that I always said I was going to do. And those were exactly those things to refill the cup. So taking your vitamins before you need it in the world of mental wellness, recognizing your bandwidth and changing accordingly, and then giving yourself permission to do more of what you actually need.
I'll go ahead and jump in. One of the things that's like helped me, and then has also helped some of my clients, the ones that actually do it. To Irina's point,
Take your vitamins.
Yes, is actually looking at it on a bigger picture and then bringing it back down to your individual level. So on the bigger picture, I always talk about like we're living in 3 contexts or living through. So there's like pre-pandemic, the pandemic, and then post-pandemic. Unless you're over 100 years old, you don't know anything about living through a pandemic. But when you look back to like the 20s, thinking in terms of there was the pandemic, there was the roaring 20s for a certain amount of people, and then there was the Great Depression. So the way I like to frame it is like now we're in the pandemic and the rest is kind of an unknown. So realizing like you're going to be in that unknown. So everything you do and your framework of being is based off of that. And then going back to like looking at the things that brought you joy in the past, and seeing either if you can do them or do them in a different version of them. And for me, I look back when I look through some of my like back to my childhood, like I love drawing. So like picking up right now, a lot of these companies have like giving you like free months of whatever. So I picked up Skillshare so I can start learning how to draw. I got back into running marathons, not to like pound my chest or like post on social media, because I enjoy them and they're the safest way for me to see the majority of a city I'd ever want to see. So like, for example, running in Miami, 26 miles, roads closed, I can see the city and it brings me joy. The training sucks, but it brings me joy. And I think the third piece is, I think like nutrition. There's the studies out now around like, it really does matter what we put in our bodies. And I'm not saying like your weight or your, anything like that, but like truly like what we eat, just as much as like what we consume, like from media, like totally infects us and affects us. And so like, I think the last piece is just keeping it all simple, to the point of like grace, like whatever you plan, also plan for it all not happening, or you waking up not feeling like, I didn't feel like going on a run this morning. I did it. It sucked. I had some some good thoughts. In the end, I feel really good again. And I know that's like a mental wealth deposit, as I call it, to like build up my bank, because I know burnout's going to happen. Like I'm going to face it, or in the coming years, because there's so many unknowns. In my 46 years, there's been a lot of unknowns, so there's going to be more.
The thing that I would add, I think to what's already been said is that I really, Anthony, I love what you said about giving yourself grace. And I think particularly coming from some place where I've always been very driven and have been in high performing environments, I've always looked that better often than not is to get somewhere faster and quicker. And when I started, experiencing burnout for, this time around, I really had to force myself to be kind to myself and to give myself time to do what I needed to do to get back to being a better version of myself. And I think that this time around, making space for myself to just to be patient and to take my vitamins, but to not necessarily put additional added pressure that I need to get back by this date or I need to get back by that date, because ultimately, life's not a race. And Anthony, to your point, like even if you thought it was, like you don't have direct control over at any given time. There's a lot of things that can never happen. And so I think as an individual, just being able to give yourself some grace to do what you need to do, I think is really important. And then as an individual, another thing I would add is that, if you're someone who either is around other people who are in environments like this, or if you're a manager or leader, even if you are okay, there's a decent likelihood that someone is potentially in a challenging spot. And so as an individual, I think, one thing that you can do, and I remember Emily Nagasaki wrote about this in her book, but one of her lines was, the way to be burnout is to care more deeply. We as individuals, I think, and part of the reason why I think this is so important to me, one of the things we can do as ourselves, particularly those of us who are in positions of power, can be more thoughtful and be more mindful of what's going on with our people. And from tactically, just in terms of, making sure you're checking in and developing a sense of trust so that when you do ask your employees, how are you doing? They can feel honest and be honest with you and open up if they are potentially struggling with something, whatever that may be. But certainly not limited to just the workplace, also your friends, your family members, and things like that. So as an individual, even if you do feel like you're in a decent position, just remember that there's probably someone close to you who might be experiencing this, and to check in on that.
Yeah. And you're anticipating kind of where I want to go next with the conversation too. I just want to say one thing here that I have found that might be helpful for somebody out there, which is that you really do have to find your own solutions, and that it's important to listen to the experts and really, understand in general, like what you can do, and bring it back to your own life. I will say that I had about a month ago, I was really hard on myself because I was working hard and I was thinking I'm not supposed to be doing that because everybody says you're supposed to take time off. Everybody says you're supposed to take time off. But when you do that, you're actually creating more friction too in your life. And I found, well, okay, in this moment in time, I can't work less, but what can I do? How can I build in that resilience? What can I do? So I started meditating for 5 minutes in between meetings. I started doing walking meditations from my desk to the kitchen and back, and just bringing in little moments of mindfulness that really fundamentally changed my wellness. And then also, like Anthony said, really spending more time, or not spending more time, but just thinking about what was going into my body so that I was not treating myself with junk food. I was treating myself with healthy food and making sure that my body felt good. And that exercise, again, like taking walks in between meetings or during meetings. So all of these things can make a big difference too. So I think it's also important is to find your own path of resilience making, and whatever that is for you, rather than that potential friction of hearing what you're supposed to do and then getting hard on yourself for not doing it, which is contributing to the problem, not the solution. So let's talk about solutions at the manager level and at the leadership level. What can people who are managing people do to really notice when their team might be experiencing burnout, and also I think working to do what you can so that they don't experience burnout?
Yeah, I want to jump in here because I read something this morning, just blew my mind. So not blew my mind, it's not surprising. There was a study in the UK, and I got to read deeper into it, but it's like 43% of all sick days in this study were actually attributed to burnout for these individuals. And again, I don't know the sample size yet, but that's something that's frightening on a lot of levels, unless there's going to be action around it. And then in the US, there's all these well-being programs, but I think Harvard just did a report or a study on the Harvard Business Review that they broke it out between mental well-being, physical, and I think financial. And I paid more attention to the mental because that's what I focus on. But in that study, they were saying like 87% of the people said that there was a well-being program offered, but it was like 23% of the people were actually using it. And so when you think on an organizational level and for managers, yes, you try to think of things to prevent, but you're already spending money on things that can help your employees. You're really good at understanding the gap between what your customers need and the solutions you want to provide. Well, start to look inside and figure out what your employees need. And it's not going to be a blanket thing. It's like offering Calm app to everybody isn't the solution. It is part of. I use it. But it's part of. And I think so as managers and leaders, you need to model what you want. Or gosh, not to sound corporate, do as you say, so your employees can do as you do. Whether it's mental well-being or like paid time off. I'm a fan of unlimited PTO as long as leaders model it. Like, are you taking time off? Are you emailing somebody at 10 in the morning when everyone on the team knows that person is out on vacation or out on a mental health day or out on sick leave or something? Stop just talking about it and actually be about it. And I think it's different from a corporate to a mid-sized company to a startup. I think as a startup, there's no reason you should have back-to-back meetings, or don't complain about back-to-back meetings if you're a leader. If it's your company, you can make the adjustment, and then make the time. I think early on, especially startup founders, as you're building your team, build in the systems and processes and mechanisms, some formal and informal, to help you understand the needs of your team, whether it's a roster or a roster kind of thing. It's like, hey, my favorite food is this. My favorite place to visit is this. Here's how I like being communicated with. Here's those kind of things, I think, help you understand how to help the person. So then when you have these solutions that you want to provide, one, you're getting proper ROI for your investment, but two, your team is getting the proper things they need to be able to combat, prevent, live a better life, of which being an employee is part of their life.
Irina?
Yeah, I'll add a couple things to definitely echo everything Anthony was saying on that. Within the managers, some of the biggest things, absolutely illustrating the behavior is huge. It's actually one of the number one reasons that people don't use their benefits and they don't take their time is they don't see their leaders doing it. So they don't think there's actual support in the organization to do so. And people are dealing with internal conflicts of looking like a slacker, even if they feel themselves wilting inside. It's not that they don't want to perform. It's not that they aren't trying to work hard. If they are dealing with burnout, they literally have no energy to do it. And so if you can be the difference of your employees taking a day off before they need it, look at it in a good way. You get a day off too. Like, you are taking the benefits. This is part of your compensation package. I harp on this all day. In 2018, there were 768 million unused vacation days in the US. That is ridiculous. Just point blank, it is just ridiculous. And it was about a third of those just got wiped away and weren't rolled over. So individuals are literally giving money back to their companies and saying, you know what, never mind, I don't need my full compensation pack. We are no longer our parents' generation where it was a brag. I've had conversations with my father-in-law who talked about the years he went without taking vacation days. It's not a good look. That's not, once again, not brag value. So by you taking time, by you talking about taking time, not because you're traveling the world, but because you laid on your couch, because you were exhausted, those are the things that illustrate little small changes that can add up. That was 768 million unused vacation days in 2018. And even last year, we were sitting on a PTO bomb where organizations were scared because people weren't taking their time off despite the pandemic. So this isn't a fluke. Another big one is clarification and communication. So being transparent. Even as a leader, you don't have to know it all. And when you fake it, your employees know it. So when you're like, oh, we have all the answers, they know you're lying. So if you don't know, but you're working on it, communicate that. It's the lack of communication that causes churn, that creates the rumor mill, that creates unnecessary stress. We are not in a situation where we need stress added. So if you can just say, hey, we recognize this, we're working on it, we will communicate when we have an update. Those little things make a world of difference. Just think about how that would impact you in your lives. Being flexible. There's that wonderful debate about going back into the office. And as someone who works in office furniture and office space design, I'm a little bit conflicted, but we cannot expect people to just go back into the office like all is back to 2018. There's no new normal. So instead of worrying about how can we get back, how can we build towards the future in which people are starting to work? It's not a matter of future of work. It is what is work now. We are in the midst of building the future of work. So starting from a blank slate and just creating it from scratch and bringing in the buy-in of your employees in that build is huge, huge. Every organization is going to be different. So we just have to recognize, hey, we're starting over. What does that look like? And then last but not least, getting very real, stop rewarding bad managers. Let's just stop it. Point blank, period. Like, it is so frustrating to continually see bad leaders move up the ladder and organizations who are very knowledgeable about what is going on, because some people actually have the oomph to say it in their exit interviews. So you cannot act as though you don't know these people are adding on additional pressure. The toxicity is actually more costly to your organization than many other things. It is more costly than throwing away like unnecessary training. The toxicity is rampant and it is doing you a disservice. So stop rewarding bad leaders and managers and stop rewarding your good people with more work. There is a limit to that. And people are calling your bluff and saying no. So finding that happy balance, it is new, it is uncomfortable, but it will make a world of difference. And people talk about organizations that care about them. Word of mouth is your most powerful tool. So let's build towards that future of work that we are already in and stop trying to act like we can go back in time. So yeah, I had to drop that one in there because it's a point of frustration for me, as you can probably feel.
Yeah, no, and it makes a huge difference. And I will say that what I'm hearing is very similar to, I work with management teams a lot on helping them build more inclusive teams. And it's very similar work that just, leading with empathy and really, really understanding what your team is uniquely going through and doing the work around that. And I love that. I want to jump into a couple questions. We have several actually. Let's Let's take this one from Katie. I would love to hear more about burnout and detachment, particularly related to acquisitions, how to best handle that. So in these big transition moments in teams, are there any tips and tricks on keeping people involved when they're happening? Acquisitions in particular. Anybody have thoughts? Or just in general, kind of these bigger transition moments on teams?
I'll take that one. I'll share some thoughts. Once again, we all know, I think we've all agreed there's no silver bullet to anything. But an acquisition is very much like any major change in an organization. That's same as a reorg, same as an office closing. It is a major shift. And one of the first things is to recognize it's a major shift. And so speaking to it as though it is such, I'm recognizing that there will be some internal anxiety that comes with it is huge. So how can organizations help? Leaders talking about the impact to them and how they're managing it goes a long way. So it recognizes it and builds empathy at the highest levels. So that's huge. Making sure employees understand the tools and resources that are available to them that can help them balance in their personal life. There is a huge lack of awareness of mental wellness tools and resources in orgs. That's why utilization continues to be extremely low. There is also a lack of trust in said tools. So covering off on those gaps and just being upfront, speaking to the confidentiality of things that are managed by third parties, highlighting where these resources are, and empowering your managers to actually enable their teams to use them, those will go a long way. Acquisitions are long, so let's not act like it's all going to be gone away just by someone signing up for their 6 EAP program or 6 AAP sessions. So what are you doing along the way? What kind of check-ins can be put in where the community can talk, where true concerns can be highlighted and addressed? Once again, it doesn't have to be a perfect answer. Your answer can say, we don't know yet. But just making sure that there's a way to get that feedback loop going so that people feel heard and that it is actually authentic and not just PR speak. Your employees know that too. They can tell they're talking about it when you're not in the coffee room or on that Slack. So that is a major change. So recognizing it, communicating within it, creating community and support, and then recognizing some people are just not going to be okay with it and they're going to leave. And so people are going to leave organizations, point blank period. So don't make it a toxic experience that makes them talk badly once they leave. Still support them. They're part of your community and part of your network and will continue to be a part even once their LinkedIn changes. So those are some. They're not extremely detailed, but hopefully super helpful.
Yeah, absolutely.
I think the thing that stands out to me, and I'm going to make the assumption that if you're asking the question, you care about your people and you want what's best for them. But assuming that's the case, anytime there's a big change like that, there are things that are going to be within your control. And then there are going to be things that are going to be out of your control as an employee and as the manager. And I think the best thing that you can do is to help your employees understand A, that concept, but B, help them kind of get context around what is it within their control, and then what is outside of their control. I think the best thing in those situations is to help people feel empowered so that they can make the best decisions possible. To your point, you may not know exactly what's going to happen, right? These things do take a lot of time. Anytime an acquisition is done, attrition is always baked into the cost of the sale. And so the company knows that as well. But if you really care about your people and you want what's best for them, try to help them as best as you can understand the things that are within their control and the things that are outside of it. And, to the point you just made, like if even if they do choose to leave, the way that you help them leave, they'll remember that. And whether that's for karma or just for the chance to potentially work with them again, they will remember you for how you left. And that was the one thing I will say in my experience that I am incredibly grateful for, is that I had a manager and a set of leaders who were very supportive about and gave me whatever I needed to make sure I was okay. And I will always remember that and will always be very, very grateful for that.
Yeah.
I just want to add one thing on that. It could even be as much as communicating what is important to you and your leadership team in this transition. So it could be your commitments to your employees. Like, these are the things that we can commit to you, or these are the whys or the things that we want to make sure to keep top of mind. Like, just even those things, it helps understand the why. Because when people don't know why and they just see stuff happening, that creates angst and they fill in gaps. So think of it as a personal relationship, and where would the things drive you mad? And then fill in those gaps for your employees as best as you can. But good luck in that. That, I think, is a great thing. So congratulations. I'm gonna.
Yeah, I'll just say one more thing is that communication is so important through acquisitions too, and going through the unknowns, and the less unknowns there are, the better there too. So we're just about out of time. I do want to ask very quickly from each of you, if you could say just one quick thing about how you would have wanted an ally to show up for you when you were experiencing that burnout. Just one thing fairly quickly.
I'd have to say I would want an ally to, and it happened. So check on me, and when they checked on me, like check, however that communicate, like, hey, let's meet up for whatever. They were present for me, and present to hear me, and listen to me, and if I asked for things, for solutions or for help, then they'd chime up, but they wouldn't be there to fix me because I wasn't broken. I think that's, I mean, it's the human thing. Like, that's how, I mean, take out all the PR, take out all the constraints, just as an ally, show up human to human. If you built that trust, mind you got to build that trust first. Otherwise, I'm not going to talk to you.
Awesome. Al, do you have something? Or
Yeah, I would just say I would want them to ask, how are you? And truly mean it and truly want to listen.
Awesome.
I would add, I was very lucky to have a good ally and one of my managers during my experience. And the best thing he did was to have real conversations and reset expectations. And even some of that was a matter of, hey, I thought I was going to be in this top box, but the way that life is going, this is what I'm aiming for. And then we reorganize responsibilities accordingly. So being very real about what needs to get done and how you get it done, because as a leader, you still have objectives, but you can still be human while managing a team. So recognizing it and then restructuring how work gets done so that the people who need to breathe can breathe, but you can also keep going in what you are honestly getting paid to do.
Awesome. Awesome. Thank you so much, all three of you, for this great discussion and sharing the wisdom that you have today. Really appreciate you. And to our audience, as many of you know, I ask each time for you to commit to taking action, because it's important that we listen and we learn and we take action. So my question to you is how will you support a colleague this week? Will you check in with them? We definitely heard that. Will you work to create the structural changes that are needed? How will you support folks either who are experiencing burnout or making sure that they're not going to experience burnout? So thank you all for listening, for your questions. Our next live show is December 7th on redefining normal in the remote and hybrid workplace. Irena actually hinted at that subject in this episode today. So it's time to redefine normal, what that looks like. So hope to see you all there. Thank you, everyone. And thank you again, Al, Anthony, and Irena. Really appreciate you. Thanks again to First Tech Federal Credit Union as well. Awesome. Bye, everybody.